Hello and welcome to this webinar. Well, it's the last webinar of the month, but it's definitely not the last for the year. And as tradition, we are still waiting for a couple of people logging in. So we wait a couple of seconds, maybe 30 seconds or so, and then I will go over the details of this webinar. Thank you. So I know I didn't wait exactly 30 seconds or so, but nonetheless, a couple of housekeeping guidelines and rules. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A widget and ask questions. Yes, there will be a Q&A session at the end, but I also try to look on a regular basis at those questions that are popping up, and maybe I'm able to weave them in during the presentation. But at the end of the day, yes, please use the Q&A area, because I really hope that you have a lot of questions. This is not supposed to be a webinar where, you know, one person pushes something and the audience is just receiving it, but really, hopefully, we can make it a little bit more engaging. So today's webinar is titled Information Security Trends, a year in review and what's next. And yes, I must admit, it's already January 31st, so the first month of the year is over. And originally, I had planned to do it a little bit earlier in the month, but for whatever reason, that didn't work out. But at the same time, I think this small little delay also gives us the opportunity to really summarize the big topics of last year and see already good trends for this year. So quick intro of myself. I'm at SGS, the Global Head for Strategy and Business Development, and I'm in the business of third-party assessments for the last, 28 years or so, living in Chicago for the last 25 plus years, and originally, obviously, from Germany. In the past, I had the privilege to be an auditor for all kinds of ISO management system standards, from ISO 9001 to ISO 27001, CSA Star 22301, and name it. And I'm also sitting on 2 ISO committees, namely Subcommittee 27 and SC 42. And those subcommittees of ISO are responsible for publishing, writing and publishing standards to information security, as well as to AI. And I must tell you, this is a really rewarding activity, because it really gives me the opportunity to help design and improve the existing standards, and at the same time, cooperate with people from literally around the world. So today's webinar, we will talk a little bit about, of course, SGS, who is SGS, but also review the top developments of last year. And then I would like to talk a little bit about the current transitions of ISO standards, because when an ISO standard is there and revised, then there is some kind of transition that is necessary for the clients to be aware of, so that they can adjust their systems accordingly. And then I will talk about upcoming international standards. We'll talk about upcoming regulations and regulatory legislative requirements, and provide a very quick overview over how SGS may be able to help your organization. So who is SGS? For all intents and purposes, SGS is the world's largest TIC company, as we like to say, Test, Inspection, Certification. And I describe it as, we are testing things. And I intentionally use that word because it could be, well, the fabric of your clothes, it could be food, it could be IoT devices, it could be chips, the chips you eat, as well the chips in your iPad. It could be systems. Everything that can be tested, SGS is most likely able to test. And we started about 145 years ago, literally as a grain inspection authority. When people wanted to export a grain from France and ship it to England, our people, our inspectors, verified that this was indeed grain and not some kind of sand. And food inspection and food safety is still one of our major activities and businesses. But obviously, I'm coming from what we call business assurance. And business assurance is the business unit that is responsible for all kinds of sensors for management system certification. So it's about the governance of the system. In this division, in the business assurance division, we are offering technical consulting, we are offering customized audits, certification, and training. I need to emphasize that no, we cannot do consulting and certification at the same time for the same client, for the same subject, because obviously that would be considered a conflict of interest, and that's not possible. When we are talking about certification, usually we are talking about certification to some kind of ISO standard. And I'm pretty sure that everyone on this webinar knows what an ISO standard is, but nonetheless, ISO stands for International Organization of Standardization, headquartered in Geneva, and is really a federation of national standardization bodies. So for example, the United States is represented by ANSI, Germany is represented by DIN, Deutsche Industrie Norm, and so on and so forth, right? So every country has their representation, and then representatives of those national bodies are coming together in those committees I mentioned earlier and discuss and figure out what kind of requirements should be in those standards. In addition to those requirement standards, there are also other documents that help organizations to better understand, and these are guidance standards. So there is a whole library of documents available from ISO, and I only would like to encourage everyone on this call to go to ISO website and see what is available. So what is the SGS difference? Well, on the previous slide, or one of the previous slides, you've seen that we have close to 100,000 employees. We are pretty much active in nearly every country. You can imagine which countries we are not active, but in nearly every country we are active. And we have a large footprint of resources and expertise to help organizations with their specific needs. And bringing me to the next slide, top overview or overview over the top developments of last year. And I must admit, when I created the next couple of slides, I got a little bit depressed because it was really more something like a summary of bad stuff. But before we go there, I would like to start or encourage everyone to participate in our first poll. And the question is very simple, actually. And this is on a scale 1 to 5. How frequently are you using or utilizing AI systems and technology? So 1 would be not at all, and 5 would be every single day. So please answer 1, if not at all, 2, maybe once per quarter, 3, once per month, and 4, once per week, and 5 every day. So let's see what you guys come up with, and I give you a couple of more seconds to provide your answer, and really looking forward to what the answers might be. So from your gut feel perspective, how often are you using AI systems? Okay, I'm counting down. 3, 2, 1, done. So let's have a quick look at the results. And the results are in. Not at all, 46.7%. Maybe once per quarter, 13.3. Once per month, 20%. Once per week, 20, and every day, 0. Well, sorry to say, you all were wrong. You are all using AI technology every single day. Why do I say that? Siri, call home. Alexa, next channel. In Word, text editing, typographical mistake, suggestion to change something, going to Google, entering something. Did you mean this and this? Going to Bing, entering something. May I suggest? That is AI. Every time you call this wonderful 1-800 number, customer service, and you speak, and you hear an IVR, interactive voice recognition, and you speak, AI. AI is prevalent in every single thing we have today. Yes, I understand that last year was one of those buzzword kind of years where AI all of a sudden popped up in everyone's mind because of ChatGPT and other generative AI systems. However, AI has been around for a couple of years now, and it sneaked in slowly but steadily in our everyday life without us really realizing it. It was a nice thing, Siri, call home, right? But that is AI. And I think this is how we really need to understand that AI is in a lot of products, in a lot of services, and you have it everywhere. So, but nonetheless, thank you very much for the response. Much appreciated. So let's go next. 2023 AI events. Oh yes, that was a long list. And originally I had planned to do that in just one slide, and I failed because there were just simply too many of interesting events. Some of them were, let's say neutral because there is some kind of announcement, there is some kind of new framework published by NIST. Then something totally boring for the majority of you on the call, like the voting ended on ISO DIS 42001. For me personally, as you can imagine, this was a very important step because moving from draft international standard to final draft international standard is a very, very important step in the life cycle of an international standard. Then there were, from my perspective, funny things like, the Pope in a nice, very expensive jacket. But when you really think about that, that is very dangerous because it can be, will be, and has been used to plant misinformation. And that's the issue. And I'm not even talking about, AI systems that create pictures of people naked. I'm not even talking about, all kinds of very, very bad activities. At the end of the day, every technology always will be used first by bad actors. That's just how it works. And then the good people will try to evaluate it and try to come up with countermeasures. And we are at this phase right now with AI where legislation is lagging behind reality, where companies are lagging behind reality. And this is something that is quite serious. I recently spoke to a person at a non-profit organization, which is, I cannot name the organization's name, but let's say they are the world's leading organization in their specific field. And she said, well, just last week we had a situation where a paper was the very last step before publication. And it went through all kinds of peer reviews. And it got high grades. And then it came to my desk and I said, something is strange. And my contact person checked, and the paper was written 95% using ChatGPT. Oops. I must admit, I have used ChatGPT. I have no problems admitting that we wrote a job description using ChatGPT. And yes, we have hired a person according to that job description. But we used it as a tool. And that's the important difference, right? There's a difference between using this kind of generative AI systems exclusively for copy and paste versus generating the text on one screen and then literally turn over to another screen and see that as an inspiration. And unfortunately, people are like water, electricity. All three, people, water, and electricity, seek the path of least resistance. And that means we are lazy, and that means copy and paste. And this is extremely dangerous when it comes to AI. So I have no problems if you guys are using AI. I do it, we all do it. But I would like to ask to be very careful in how we are using it. We also have obviously now recognized that law enforcement agencies are using AI and also warning in terms of using AI in not so good way. Law enforcement is also consisting of people, right? And those people also may use AI in a not perfect way. So then the second half of the year, similar kind of stuff, new regulations coming up. President Biden signed the AI executive order, which I think is very important as a first step here in the United States. Then the UK held an AI safety summit, and which led to a very important international agreement. And yes, also very important and personally very proud of the fact that SGS has issued the very first ISO IEC FDIS 42001 certificate. So that certificate was based on the final draft international standard, because we know that between the final draft and the final version, there cannot be any significant changes. There must not be any significant changes. The only changes allowed between the FDIS and the final publication of a standard are literally limited to spelling mistakes, grammar issues, and things like that. So once the FDIS is issued, everybody knows what will be in the final version of the standard. And that was the reason why we were able to issue in November our very first certificate. Then NIST also issued their AI intelligence safety, or established their AI Safety Institute, which is very important because now there is an institution that will help us to evaluate AI systems for safety. In the meantime, I can confirm that the EU has done something very, very similar. And talking about the EU, Europe also then started to go into the final phase of the famous EU AI Act. And the act is still not officially published. However, guess what? Monday last week, the final text was leaked. So there goes another thing in terms of secrecy and information security, but the text has been leaked and is now pretty much publicly available, although the text, the law itself, the act itself is not published. Talking about publication, ISO 42001, the AIMS AI Management System standard has been published in December. So a little bit over 5 weeks ago, we finally have the standard available. And yes, this is definitely a document that I super highly recommend to everyone interested in AI and the governance of AI systems to have a quick look at that and really think about how that standard will be able to help your organization to have a solid, fundamentally good management system, governance system in place. And then that is hot out of the press, and that's the reason why, you know, it was in a certain way good that this webinar is not immediately at the beginning of the year, but a little bit later in end of January. NIST warns that it's fairly easy, quote unquote, to alter AI systems by threat actors. And one of the concepts that might be of interest is called poisoning. So AI systems are based upon what kind of methodology? It's fundamentally pretty simple, actually. You have some kind of network of neurons that are talking with one another, and you feed them with data. Then the data goes through the network, and then there is some kind of review that says the result is correct or not. So for example, you feed the network with pictures of cats. And you say, cat, 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 cat. Sooner or later, you feed it with pictures of flowers and dogs and cars and people. Every time now the system says cat, you say wrong, wrong, wrong. And then you start mixing cats, dogs, people, flowers, da, da, da. And every time it says cat, you say, okay, 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 no, 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 when it's not a cat, right? Then you repeat that, and sooner or later now that network has been trained to identify cats. Now you can easily see what potentially could happen later on in production. A person feeds the system provides the answer, and then there is this review, or there is this question. Did you like my answer? Nope. Oh, I'm so sorry that you didn't like my answer. What was wrong? This was not a cat. Now, if that is done continuously, intentionally, in the wrong way, you can easily see that now the system is getting brainwashed and sees things in a totally different way. Now, if it's just cats and dogs and pictures, that's funny. But now imagine some kind of system that is analyzing X-ray pictures of patients, and broken arm might be still not really a problem, but think about cancer diagnosis. And if now you have, let's say, a disgruntled technician in a hospital that says, definitely cancer, if it's not cancer, or the system says it is not cancer, and the technician says, cancer, over time the system will now be totally confused and provide wrong assessments. And that is called poisoning, and that is something that is fairly easy to do. That brings us to the next poll question. Were you or your company affected by any cyber attack in 2023? Yes, no, I'm not sure. Same rule as previously, maybe a minute or so. Think about it. Please be so kind to click A, B, or C, and then in a couple of seconds, we will review the answers. Okay. I see that the majority of attendees has voted. So I start counting down. Now I'm not really sure because I don't, now I see my own picture again, so I'm good. So now let's see what is the result. Yes, we have been attacked. 26.7%. No, 40%. I'm not sure, 33%. For everyone who said no, I would like to suggest think about I'm not sure. Because just because you don't know doesn't mean you weren't. Unfortunately, many hacks, many attacks take place without the knowledge of the victim. Attackers can be easily in your system for months, for years. And then there are obviously those kind of attacks that are good news prevented because, you know, countermeasures were already in place and didn't really then affect the organization. Unfortunately, I think that the majority of people and majority of organizations were indeed affected by some kind of cyber security hack, either last year or in the last couple of years. And the next couple of slides will be unfortunately not very encouraging. But that said, I think it's better to talk about reality so that we can be aware of what needs to be done and what should be done to be really on the alert and making sure that if we are attacked, or should I say, when we are attacked, that we have appropriate countermeasures in place. So major cyber events from last year and a little bit of this year. So according to an organization called IT Governance in the UK, last year there were a staggering number of, I need to really look at that, 8 billion records affected. So January, Twitter had an issue with just 220 million email addresses hacked. Then there was an insurance in February with close to 9 million people were affected. In March, there was a company called Latitude out of Melbourne in Australia with 14 million records affected. Then April, Shields Healthcare Group in Massachusetts, 2.3 million people affected. June, Oregon and Louisiana were affected, or their motor vehicle departments were affected. And Louisiana reported 6 million records affected, and Oregon DMV reported 3.5 million driving licenses and identity cards affected. And let's face it, now we are talking about name, first name, date of birth, gender, right? So picture, think about that. Then in July, 34 million Indonesians were affected and had their passport data leaked. Good news, the SEC also adopted rules on cybersecurity risk management. And it's now a requirement that publicly traded companies are reporting on their cybersecurity posture and their risk management approach. And I think that this is a very, very good step because it really forces the board level to think about cybersecurity. Then in the UK in August, apparently there were 40 million records leaked from the UK's electoral register. And it continues in September. There was an organization called Better Outcome Registry, 3.5 million records compromised. October, the Indian Council of Medical Research reported that 805 million records were affected, or Indian residents were affected, including their national ID. And then in November, there was an organization called Kid Security, which is providing a parental control application, was hacked, which is a little bit ironic when you think about it. An organization that claims to provide security for kids has been hacked, and the parents' and kids' data has been stolen. And then in December, security researchers identified an open, unprotected database exposing more than 1.5 billion records of property ownership in the United States. So if you own a property, your data was on that. So when we go back to the poll question earlier, please review your answers. Then in December, the European Commission reached a political agreement with regard to the Cybersecurity or Cyber Resilience Act, which is very important because that means now in Europe, there will be a very strong legislation that requires organizations to really focus on cybersecurity and making sure that they are resilient to attacks. There's one thing to be attacked. There's one thing not to know about it. There's one thing to know about it and be able to still function and potentially recover from the incident. So in summary, this list was published by IT Governance, addressing a very large number of records. But wait, hot out of the press, still developing. The mother of all breaches, 26 billion records were leaked. That affects organizations from LinkedIn, Twitter, Weibo, Tencent, and other platforms' user data. And that means most likely I'm one of those 26 billion. Most likely you are one of those 26 billion. So that is the state of affairs, what we've seen last year and a little bit of this year. Now let's talk about current transitions of ISO standards. As I mentioned earlier, ISO standards are getting changed on a regular basis. And then if there is a certification associated with that, the organizations have time to transition, because obviously from the publication date, there needs to be some kind of fair period of time where organizations can adapt to the new requirements. So this poll question is your organization currently certified to ISO 27001? And if yes, to which version? So while we are waiting for the answers to pop in, there's one question that says, are companies allowed to withhold data breaches attacks from employees? I'm not a lawyer. Ask your legal advisor. And I think we really need to look at the different legislations in different countries. But besides being allowed, I think there is another important question, and this is it morally okay? And that is something that, well, organizations really need to ask themselves. And I think transparency is the foundation of trust. Every time I was managing a team, my first sentence and first introduction was to my team members, I expect that you come to me regardless whether it's bad news or good news. I can handle bad news, but for your own sake, don't hide it. Hiding is worse than the bad situation or the bad news. So if an organization has been hacked and that affects their employees' data, I think it's not just a moral obligation, but it's also good business practice to inform the employees about the situation. And obviously that's not just employees, but also customers and suppliers, regardless whether it's a legal obligation or not. Because if you don't, the victims will not forget and you will lose all trust possible. So I think the majority of people have answered this question as well. So let's go to the results. Results. No, we are not certified, 50%. Excellent. Yes, we are certified to the 2013 version of the standard, about 16.7%. And then we have about 33% that say we are already certified to the new version of the standard. Congratulations. For those who are not certified, that's okay. There's no requirement to be certified unless it is a contractual requirement from your customers. But it's still good practice to really demonstrate to the outside world, not just trust me, believe me, but actually a third party like SGS has assessed our system. And they have indeed confirmed that we are fulfilling the requirements of the ISO 27001, which is, for all intents and purposes, the only international standard providing requirements for best practice regarding information security. Food for thought. Just think about it. So what are the current transitions? Following up from that poll question, right? So there's the, let's say, old version of the standard, the 2013 version of the standard, and then there is the newer one that was published in 2022. That transition ends in October, on October 31st next year. So you have still a year and a half time or so to transition. Our recommendation is do it as early as possible during the next recertification audit, respectively during the next surveillance audit. Actually, the next, with regard to the next recertification audit, there might be actually already limitations, because if your recertification audit is later this year, you cannot recertify to the old version, but surveillance audits still can be done to the old version. I mentioned earlier that I'm in this business of third-party assessments for a couple of years now, and every time there is a transition, there's the same old thing. Oh, I didn't know about that. When is the last possible day I can do it? Wait until the last possible day, and then being surprised that, well, there is no auditor available. Well, you had 3 years to transition. And then there's always this thing, oh, my certificate is expiring in 2 months. Can you please extend the validity? No, we can't. The validity is set. All 2013 versions certificates will expire October 31st, 2025. And yes, if you would like to keep your certification, if your company would like to keep your certification, you must upgrade to the new version. Then there is another standard that is in the final phase. There is the ISO 27006, which was last published in 2015 and will be updated early this year. So my guess is most likely in February. That is the standard that tells us, the certification bodies, how to do the audits. And how to do the audit means auditor's qualification, audit duration, content of the audit report, structure of the certificate, content of the certificate, and these kind of things, right? So the FDIS, the final draft international standard, was published in December, or should I say on December 28th. Therefore we know what is in the standard, but the standard in itself has not been published yet. So there will be that will be published very soon, and then there will be again a transition for us, the certification bodies, to get accredited to the new version. I can tell you that transition is also just limited to 2 years or so. So within 2 years, we, the certification bodies, will be accredited to the new version, and that means we will need to follow the new rules. It doesn't really affect the certified organizations directly, but indirectly, yes, because of how the duration of audits is determined and things like that. So just that's an FYI kind of thing. Then I would like to talk about upcoming international standards. And here I have a list. There's obviously the ISO 42006. We anticipate it's to be published this year, but I'm not really positive because there were some 800 or so change requests coming from the DIS to the FDIS, so not really sure about that. So that is then the standard that will tell us, the certification bodies, how to do audits to ISO 42001. Remember, that's the AIMS, the AI management system. Then there is the standard that is called ISO 27701, which is the extension to ISO 27001 for the management of privacy information. That will be a standalone standard in the future, and it's currently in CD, so that means committee draft. That's not even in DIS or FDIS, so it's a very, very early stage. Then the ISO 27006 Part 2 will get a new number, and that will be telling us, the CBs, how to do audits for 27701. There's another interesting standard coming out called Information Security, Cybersecurity, and Privacy Protection Guidance for on attributes. That's, I think, something of interest to everyone interested in ISO 27001, because that 27008 or 028 will really tell you how to work with those attributes. Then there is a standard related to AI and the guidance for addressing security threats and failures in AI systems. Then there is a PWI regarding guidelines for the assessment of information security controls. So that's very important for internal auditors as well as external auditors, as in how do I audit the controls in my ISMS. Very important. And then the ISO 27000 is under review, and that's vocabulary, so that everyone knows what is meant by incident versus event, for example. And then the big highlight is actually that the high-level structure or harmonized structure has been updated and includes now a reference to assess climate change impact. That means every management system standard, ISO 9001, ISO 14001, ISO 45001, ISO 42001, 27001, all of those management system standards will have in the future a requirement that the organization assesses the impact of their management system, of their organization, with regard to climate change. And then there is another standard related to IoT security and privacy, especially for guidelines for IoT domotics. So these are IoT devices that we all have in our house, from the smart meter to the Alexas and the other smart things we may have around us. So a lot of activities on the ISO front. Only suggest please have a look at that because it's pretty interesting to see what's going on. Then there is one question popping up. Can an organization be certified to ISO IEC 42001? Yes, organizations can be certified to the standard. SGS actually has issued already at least one certificate, maybe even more. Emphasis, though, is we have issued a certificate, but the certificate, or we are not accredited. So yes, we can issue certificates. No, we are not accredited. At this moment in time, none of the accreditation bodies is ready to issue accreditation because, frankly speaking, that very first standard here on this list, on this slide, the ISO 42006 has not been published yet. Without the publication of that standard, the ABs, the accreditation bodies, don't know what kind of criteria they need to impose upon us. So they don't know what they should audit us against. So before we can get accredited, the ABs need to have some kind of document that says we need to do something. And that's the importance of that 42006. I trust this answers this question. So let's go to the next slide. Oops, that doesn't look as I intended, but that's okay. I mentioned already the latest changes in the harmonized structure. So as I mentioned earlier, all management system standards need to follow a particular structure, which is spelled out in the HLS of ISO. And there will be in the future additional clauses, additional sentences. And these are the highlights here, adding the organization shall determine whether climate change is a relevant issue. And then later on, note, relevant interested parties can have requirements related to climate change. And that might sound a little bit strange when it comes to, let's say, quality management, when it comes to information security. But let's make a hypothetical example. If you are, I don't know, an energy plant producing electricity, regardless whether this is from coal, oil, or gas, or nuclear power, in case of a cybersecurity attack, could it be possible that this plant is polluting the environment? Yes, quite possible. If you are running one of those mega giga data centers and your power consumption is not measured in kilowatt or megawatt, but in gigawatts, do you have an impact on the environment? Yes, you do. And these are the kind of questions that every organization needs to ask themselves in terms of, do we have an update? Do we have, impact on the environment? So next, upcoming regulations, regulatory and legislative requirements. Well, I really would like to point the listeners to this wonderful document from the WEF, from the World Economic Forum, just published a couple of days ago. And it has an interesting couple of graphs. And this is, what's your perception, was the question, of cyber regulations are perceived or not to be effective method for reducing cyber risk? And there was a significant change from 2022 to 2024, where people, or should I say companies, responded, yes, agree. So from 39% up to 60% change that companies, organizations, individuals believe that indeed cyber regulations are helping us with regard to having an effective method in reducing cyber risk. But Then there is another interesting graph in that document I would like to point out, and this is related to cyber skills and talent shortages. And unfortunately, that doesn't look good because there is a widening gap between large organizations and small organizations. Large organizations have challenges to attract talent, while small organizations have no chance to attract talent. And that's bothering, because at the end of the day, attackers really don't care how big you are. Attackers look for the easiest target possible. And unfortunately, that might be small organizations. But the small organizations are the entry door to the big ones. So talent shortage is a risk for all of us. Now, coming back to what do we expect? Well, looking at a crystal ball is always problematic and always challenging. But some small things we can see already. I mentioned already the EU AI Act. It's coming. It's only a question of on what day will it be published. And that has implications not just on firms and organizations within the EU, but also to organizations pretty much around the world, as it is affecting organizations if they provide services or products into the EU, that will be affecting them. Then I also would like to really challenge everyone to think about cybersecurity is old. We know about it for a couple of years, but now we need to think about AI risks. And you know, there was a webinar recently that said something like demystifying cyber risk for the board. I think that's very important, but I really would like to rephrase that into demystifying AI risk for the board. And what it really, really means is the technical people need to change their way of communication. They should not talk in terms of technical stuff. They should talk in terms of business language. And sorry, that means dollars, that means euros, that means yen, whatever currency. Because the board doesn't really understand, oh, there is an incident or there is a breach. But if you tell the board that breach costs us $100,000 per affected person, there are approximately 10 million people affected, do the math, and the board understands it. So really use business language. I also believe that every organization must have a solid and effective governance system, which really means a management system based upon ISO standards, because those ISO standards are really internationally recognized best practice. Privacy regulations will be enhanced and amended to address AI issues. And also hot out of the press, New Hampshire as well as New Jersey are joining the other states in the United States having their privacy regulation. So it's my understanding that in New Hampshire, the House has approved the legislation. Now it needs to go to the Senate, needs to be signed by the governor. And in New Jersey, actually, it was approved and already signed into law on January 16th. And don't be surprised if those privacy regulations will include some references to automatic decision-making, translation AI. And yes, we will also see specific AI regulations with regard to oversight and certification. AI will be used in both cybersecurity defense as well as offense. And when we are looking at that, for example, at the quality of phishing emails, they are very good. You know, in the past, some, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 years ago, we got these emails from our uncle in Nigeria asking us about some kind of stuff. And it was so obvious that it was wrong, right? But now we're getting very sophisticated, very well formulated emails that cannot be really differentiated from emails written by a person. And they are personalized. They have already information about you, and the rest is history. So we really need to think about how we, the good people, can use AI for our benefit, because the bad guys are already using it. We also need to think about how to prepare for cybersecurity or information security issues. They will get worse, no question about that. They will not stop, and will require every organization to educate their people. Goes without saying that this is obviously written by a human because there's a spelling mistake. So that's the evidence that ChatGPT was not involved. But kidding aside, it's very clear that you will be attacked. It's not a question of if. Hybrid work will remain a serious challenge, and that has implications on cybersecurity. I will accelerate a little bit because of time issues, but at the end of the day, please have a look at the slides, because we will share those with you after the webinar. A couple of quick overview over our services. We are providing both training as well as assessment services to a slew of ISO standards, from ISO 27001 to ISO 27017 and 18 and 19, as well as 27701 and 42001. 22301, I did not mention that standard, is a very important standard because it's related to business continuity, but also ISO 20000, which is IT service management. And that brings me to the very last poll, and that poll is, what kind of additional training needs do you see either for you or for yourself as beneficial in 2024? Please enter your answers here, and I then will jump to the next slide already, but please be so kind to let us know what kind of additional training needs you might see. So what should you do next week or next couple of weeks? Because I'm a firm believer of homework. So next week, you should review ISO 27001 and ISO 27002. You should review the content of ISO 42001, the AIMS, the AI management system, and you should research training classes. And then within the next 3 months or so of this presentation, you really should attend an online 27001 or ISO 42001 class. Yes, we do offer a 42000 class already, so please be on the lookout for invites. Go to our website and check it out. And if you're not certified, remember there were 50% of respondents earlier that said we are not certified. It might be actually beneficial to think about already engaging with us for your certification needs and book a pre-assessment and possibly even stage 1 assessment. And then within 6 months, the stage 2 assessment for getting certified. So that brings us to the Q&A, and I think I answered nearly all questions. There's one question that says, there are AI programs that allow teachers to figure out which paper has used AI, but shouldn't be there also built-in countermeasures in AI systems to prevent threat actors from utilizing these systems in a negative way? Well, that would be like asking a knife manufacturer to prevent the knife being used from attacks and stabbing people, right? Is it really possible that the manufacturer of a tool can prevent, maybe even foresee, what kind of misuse could happen? Can they put it into the legal requirement? Sure. But the last thing the bad people would do is follow the law. So would it be possible? Maybe, maybe not. But honestly, I doubt. So that said, it's all about having rules, having legislation in place, and making sure that everyone understands what can be done, should be done, must not be done, and then we take it from there. That said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I sincerely hope that this was helpful, that this webinar helped you to understand the current situation and how you potentially could benefit from getting certified to either ISO 27001 or ISO 42001. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us on our website, sgs.com/certification. Subscribe to our LinkedIn messaging. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via my email address, willy.fabritius@sgs.com. And just in case you're wondering, this QR code next to my picture is a link to my LinkedIn profile. So feel free to point your smartphone to the QR code and connect with me on LinkedIn. That said, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.